Hello, I'm Vincent McCory, Managing Editor. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. Large plumes of dark smoke hovered over Gaza City on Wednesday as Israeli forces pressed their offensive against Hamas militants in the Palestinian enclave. Britain's King Charles is on day 2 of his state visit to Kenya Wednesday as survivors of colonial-era abuses criticized his failure to issue a full apology or propose reparations. And in our technology report, the Global Initiative on Artificial Intelligence looks at regulating AI for health and establishing AI systems on safety and effectiveness. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. Israel continued its bombardment of Gaza Wednesday as airstrikes blasted apartment buildings in a refugee camp near Gaza City for a second consecutive day, causing multitude of casualties and injuries, according to Gaza's Hamas-run government. Meanwhile, people with foreign passports were able to pass through the Rafah crossing from Gaza to Egypt. It appears to be the first time that foreign passport holders are being allowed to leave Gaza since the start of the Israeli-Hamas war. Egyptian state-run media is reporting that more than 80 wounded Palestinians are also being brought from Gaza to Egypt by ambulances on Wednesday for medical treatment. Israel Defense Forces released videos Wednesday of what they say are ongoing ground operations and IDF strikes in Gaza Strip. But the footage has not been independently verified, including the location or the date when the video was shot. The Israeli military says 11 soldiers were also killed in fighting in Gaza on Tuesday, the biggest one-day loss for the armed forces since Hamas gunmen attacked southern Israel on October the 7th. Israel says its forces killed a Hamas commander in what appeared to be a targeted strike on Gaza's largest refugee camp on Tuesday. The mounting civilian toll and humanitarian disaster in the enclave is prompting the United Nations to warn that international humanitarian law is not, quote, an à la carte menu, with demonstrators worldwide urging for a ceasefire. Diane Toll reports.
Palestinian medics dug through rubble for signs of life on Tuesday after Israeli forces blew large craters in Gaza's biggest refugee camp, saying the military was targeting a central Hamas stronghold. Local health officials said at least 50 people were killed and 150 others injured in the Jabalia camp. This mother wept and prayed for 3 of her children killed in the strikes, saying, "May God have mercy on them, to God we belong, and to him we will return." The Israel Defense Forces released footage of what it said were strikes on Jabalia. In a statement, it said they killed dozens of Hamas combatants in an underground tunnel complex, as well as a commander, Ibrahim Biari. IDF spokesperson Jonathan Conricus said of Biari, quote, "He was very important, I would say even pivotal in the planning and the execution of the October 7th attack against Israel." A Hamas spokesperson denied any senior commander was at Jabalia and called Israel's claim a pretext for killing civilians. Reuters could not independently verify the number of casualties, but the many videos of dead and wounded children, such as this one from a hospital just north of Jabalia, are prompting protests around the globe and urgent calls for a ceasefire. That includes some within Israel, as families of hostages taken by Hamas worry for the safety of their loved ones believed to be in Gaza. United Nations spokesman Stefan Dujarric pointed to international humanitarian law.
Protection of civilians on both sides is paramount and must be respected at all times. The international humanitarian law establishes clear rules that cannot be ignored. It is not an à la carte menu and cannot be applied selectively.
Bolivia on Tuesday cut diplomatic ties with Israel, accusing it of committing crimes against humanity in Gaza. Others, such as Chile and Colombia, recalled their ambassadors to Israel. On Wednesday, Israel accused Bolivia of capitulation to terrorism.
That was Diane Tor of Reuters reporting. Gaza-based journalist Hind Kodari speaks about life in Gaza since the Israeli bombings began, as well as working as a journalist during this war.
Since day 2 of this war, we stopped getting electricity, no water, obviously no internet, and all you see in the streets of Gaza, people hurrying and holding these yellow gallons, searching for water. People are in lines, in queues. We're talking about whole streets, as if it's like a noodle place or a donut place where people are queuing to get some noodles or donuts.
For journalists, how have they been operating? To what extent do they get closer to where the action is and safely cover and disseminate information about what's really happening on the ground?
Actually, this time we're facing a lot of shortage in information. We're facing a lot of shortage of coverage. What happened is the journalists in the Gaza Strip have been shattered across the strip. Like some are in the south, some in the north, some are in the city, and we're not connected to each other. We don't have a base because most of the buildings that we work in and operate from are threatened to be bombed. So we don't have any area to work from. Most of the journalists are currently working from the hospitals. We're talking about the Deir al-Balah, Khan Yunis, and Gaza hospitals. And as you know, there's no banks, there are no desks, there's no chairs. We sit on the floor, we sleep on the floor. We have no access to water, to bathrooms, and at the same time, we're in the middle of hundreds of thousands of displaced people. So the situation is catastrophic for journalists. Like for us, we had a complete blackout. No one noticed what was going on in the Gaza Strip. Some managed to get eSIMs and connect. And at the end of the day, we really need to report because this is like our mission and our responsibility to speak and to describe what's currently going on in the Gaza Strip.
Well, that was journalist Hind Kodari speaking to me from Gaza. On the other side, an Israeli military spokesperson says the strike on the Jabalia refugee camp and the collapse of underground tunnels exposed the, in quote, cynical use Hamas is making of the civilian population in Gaza. For more perspective, viewer correspondent Ricky Rosen joins me live from outside Tel Aviv. Ricky, what more can you tell us about Israel's challenge in fighting Hamas in densely populated Gaza?
Well, understandably, we get limited information from the military about its ongoing operations in Gaza. What we do know is that there was intense fighting with Hamas gunmen in and around the tunnels that are situated under the Jabalia refugee camp. And the fighting resulted in the death of 13 Israeli soldiers and 50 Hamas gunmen in the last 2 days, according to the announcement of the Israeli military spokesman.
Mm-hmm. Now, we have witnessed protests in Israeli cities against the government of Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister. What is it that the civilians want, and what do they want to see happen?
The demonstrations have centered on the demands of the families of the hostages, the 249 hostages who were kidnapped and are being held in Gaza. They are demanding that the issue of the hostages be the first and foremost goal of the military operation. They're saying that they're not getting enough information from the government and that there can be no victory without the return of the hostages. And many are saying that if a deal for swapping the Israeli hostages for Palestinian prisoners is an actual deal that is proposed, that no price should be too high.
And what is the government's response?
Prime Minister Netanyahu said in a press conference that while he can't reveal details, his war cabinet has assessed that only continued military pressure on Hamas targets would pressure Hamas enough to be able to release the hostages.
Well, Ricky, thank you very much. Correspondent Ricky Rosen reporting from Tel Aviv, just outside of Tel Aviv. Thank you very much. Now, U.S. President Joe Biden is facing a revolt from some members of his own Democratic Party over his unwavering support for Israel. White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara has our report.
As Israeli airstrikes continue in Gaza, including this one on the Al-Shati refugee camp, an open letter to President Joe Biden from advocacy group the National Muslim Democratic Council, demanding that he broker a ceasefire by 5 p.m. Tuesday or face the consequence of millions of American Muslims withholding their support for his re-election next year.
We know for a fact that our community will make a difference in the battleground states. And I think Democratic Party leaders are paying attention, and they are afraid of what's happening. And they're sending messages to the White House that this is going to hurt our chances in 2024.
More than 1 million Muslim voters cast a ballot in the 2020 election, turning out in numbers large enough to potentially swing the presidential race in some battleground states. Muslim and Arab Americans traditionally vote for Democratic candidates, but a shift may be coming. A new poll by the Arab American Institute showed support for Biden dropped among Arab American voters from 59% in the 2020 election to 17% ahead of 2024.
We're going to continue engaging with the Muslim community, the Arab American community, and Palestinian American leaders to hear their concerns.
In contrast, Jewish Americans are deeply appreciative of Biden's support of Israel.
Israel is an important issue, remains a very important issue to Jewish voters. It's an issue about which there's a very high emotional attachment between Jewish Americans and support of Israel.
About 7 million Jews live in the U.S., the same number as in Israel. They make up 3% of the U.S. electorate. Biden is also widely praised in Israel. He has been urging Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to conduct the war following international humanitarian law to protect civilians.
What he's saying to Israel, to help me, to help you. If you give maximum effort to fight in the right way, according to the laws of war, then it makes it easier for me to support you and get support from you in the international community and at home in America and in the Democratic Party.
Polls show more Republicans than Democrats approve of Biden's decision to send weapons to Israel.
I do think that there isn't a lot of room for Republicans here, whether it's Trump or the Republicans in Congress, to outflank Biden on support for Israel.
Meanwhile, there's growing pressure for a ceasefire, including from anti-war protesters during Tuesday's congressional hearing. Administration officials have advocated for humanitarian pauses to allow aid to reach civilians, but say a ceasefire at this point will only benefit Hamas. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News, Washington.
On to East Africa now, where Britain's King Charles and Queen Camilla are on day two of their state visit to Kenya Wednesday. Survivors of colonial-era abuses are criticizing the king for his failure to issue a full apology or proposed reparations. For more on the king's visit to Kenya, let's go live to VOA Nairobi Bureau Chief Mariama Diallo in Nairobi. Now, Mariama, tell us more first about the monarch's Wednesday activities.
Well, thank you, Vincent, for having me. The royal couple basically kicked off day two by honoring veterans, World War II veterans, basically at the Korea Corps Cemetery. There they laid a wreath. They also observed a minute of silence. They also gave medals to few survivors who participated, few veterans who were there, including two of them. One was 104 years old, said to be 104 years old. Another one said to be 117 years old. Basically, those veterans had lost their medals for whatever reason, and they were able, the King Charles was able to actually give them new medals. So after the Korea Corps Cemetery, they went, one of the other pit stop they did was Karura Forest. You know Karura Forest very well, being from Nairobi. It's this urban forest right in the heart of Nairobi. The king went there to basically highlight the importance of green spaces.
Yes.
And while he was there, go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to also just quickly ask you about last night during a banquet, the king did acknowledge that terrible things happened to Kenyans, but he didn't come close to an apology that Kenyans want. What has been the reaction?
Well, I think the reaction has been mixed. Basically, you heard William Ruto, the Kenyan president, saying that it was a first step and that, just like him, many other people have said, yes, they respect the king for acknowledging some of these wrongdoings and atrocities from the past. But you have a lot of people on the other side that also say that, words are not enough. Just like 10 years ago when Britain basically apologized and compensated some people from the Mau Mau community. People had said then, they welcomed it, but they said it wasn't enough for the pain, suffering, and the long-term effects that uprising of the 1950s has had.
Well, we'll keep watching his trip there. Mariama, thank you very much. That's VOA Nairobi Bureau Chief Mariama Diallo reporting live. Now, still to come, regulating the use of artificial intelligence for health. Stay with us.
This week on a special edition of Straight Talk Africa, we're examining the escalating war between Israel and Hamas. Israeli military forces are pushing deeper into Gaza. Palestinians seeking shelter from intensifying airstrikes are facing blackouts, lack of food, clean water, and adequate medical care. Join me, Haiti Adams, and my guests as we discuss the deepening crisis in the Israel-Hamas war.
According to IMF statistics and surveys, women in sub-Saharan Africa continue to struggle to secure corporate employment due to limitations such as education, gender discrimination, sexual harassment, and cultural norms. This week on Our Voices, we discuss a woman's journey to securing gainful employment in the formal sector and challenges they face, as well as possible solutions. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
Well, in other news, the northeast Nigeria, jihadists affiliated to the Islamic State terrorist group killed 17 people in a raid on a remote village after villagers refused to pay an illicit tax, according to anti-jihadist militia and a resident. The World Health Organization is warning that disease outbreaks, malnutrition, and non-communicable diseases are rising in war-torn Sudan, with devastating consequences for millions of people. Since civil conflict erupted in April, more than 4.6 million people have become displaced inside Sudan. And Andrea Solange Sikato Mahito is the co-winner of the inaugural Mr. and Miss Albinism South Africa pageant. The 28-year-old Angolan model has competed in beauty pageants in her home country since her teens, but none made her feel more beautiful or purposeful as the pageant for people with albinism. Albinism, often a misunderstood condition, is an inherited genetic condition that reduces melanin pigment production. Well, consumers worldwide are used to seeing some versions of made in China on products they buy. Chinese goods usually mean low prices, something consumers like. But for manufacturers in Nigeria, Chinese imports can mean unemployment, poverty, and inflation. Gibson Emeka reports from Abuja. Nigerian Chileveth Okafor launched Chivaleth Designs in 2019. The entrepreneur sources all the raw materials for her unisex footwear locally. Despite her creativity and production quality, Okafor sells only about 7 to 8 pairs a week. She blames her lack of success on what she calls a flood of Chinese imported products.
When more imported ones are coming in, you see the locally made ones have little or no chance of even entering the market. Because why? Because the imported ones have already taken over the markets.
China is Nigeria's largest source of imports, according to the Chinese embassy in Nigeria. Shelves are full of low-cost Chinese electronics, fashion, and other consumables. And that's what residents like Dambala Bugudu and Christopher Duro are looking for.
The quality of the China's products is high, and the product and the price is cheap. So based on my experience, I prefer China's product than Nigerian products.
We always believe that whatever coming from other country should be better.
But not everyone is just shopping for the best deals. Other Nigerians like Naomi, who only goes by her first name, prefer products made in our country.
I prefer made in Nigeria instead of China because Nigeria is our country. You understand? You know, if we in Nigeria, if we didn't patronize our own goods, then who will now come and patronize us?
Other consumers like Daniel Nuafor and Sunday Oguche say Nigerian products are of higher quality.
Most of the things they import from China, most of them is inferior because they are producing it just to export it. They are not making use of it in their country.
I prefer made in Nigeria because if you make easy wear from a shoemaker shop, it will last longer than all these Chinese shoes we are wearing that you wash with soap and it will fade. A day job. I think we call it a day job because it's not good.
Obinaya Orwakpa, an economic development analyst, believes Africa is not empowering its manufacturing sector for economic competitiveness with China.
That many African countries, especially Nigeria, do not have enough energy and power to power the manufacturing sector. You're going to have unemployment issues. You're going to have, poor production processes. You're going to have high cost of production.
Economic pundits believe that the way for Africa to end its economic struggles, ranging from unemployment to inflation, is to consume what it produces. Many, like Orakpa, are urging African governments to prioritize technological development and infrastructure to boost local production. Well, the Global Initiative on Artificial Intelligence for Health is looking at regulating the industry. Africa 54 technology correspondent Paul Dio is here to tell us more about it. Hello, Paul.
Thank you, Vincent. Analysts say artificial intelligence plays a significant role in diagnosis, clinical care, drug and development, and disease surveillance could be more beneficial in settings lacking medical specialists in interpreting retinal scans and radiology images. For more insight, I spoke with Darlington Agogo, founder and CEO of Mino Health AI Labs in Ghana. He's currently attending the Global Initiative on AI for Health in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Welcome to Africa 54.
Thanks for having me. It's a delight.
You're currently attending a conference about AI and health. Tell us what this conference is all about.
This is a conference or a meeting being organized by United Nations Global Initiative on AI for Health. So this is an initiative that came out from an earlier one, which was a partnership between WHO, so World Health Organization, and the ITU. The first meeting is being co-hosted by the government of Saudi Arabia. And so what the objective has been for years was the group creating global standards that guide, the regulation of AI for health, the building, the use, the benchmarking of AI for health. We've had the pleasure of working with, different regulatory bodies from FDA, US, NHS in the UK, and all the others to look at a global framework when it comes to AI for health. And so in this new phase, we are now focused more on implementation of projects within AI for health, but still with that global landscape in it. So this is our first meeting, and we are having all sort of interesting discussions on how do we properly ensure that AI for health works for humanity. So how do we do that in a way that we enjoy the benefits, but then we also make sure that we are proactive to minimize the risks that are involved in using this powerful technology to address a very, very important aspect of our society, healthcare.
There's been a lot of talk about regulating AI, and I'm glad to hear that people in that space are finally working out a regulatory framework that can regulate this AI. From where you stand, what are the key issues that you guys are trying to address?
The risks are more practical in things that have to do with bias, fairness, because, you know, we are building the systems with data. But human society has been unfair to certain demographics. If you're looking at it from an age perspective, gender perspective, racial perspective, or more broadly, ethnicity, nationality. So if we pick this data and we build AI systems off of that data, they might further propagate these biases we've had in society. But what makes this group different is that, you know, collectively, everyone will talk about risk, and then when you ask them what's the solution, they will tell you ethical AI framework. We should make AI more fair, make AI more transparent, make AI more trustworthy. These are beautiful ideals. No one will disagree with you. But the question is, how do you technically do that? One of the things I contributed to the group is this idea called precision evaluation. So usually when you test an AI system, you would say, oh, my AI system scored 90%. But the question is, 90% on who exactly? Like, for example, we ourselves, we got our AI systems approved by Ghana FDA, and we made sure that the data that we submitted to FDA, the details about the project and everything, we did it based on the standard of some of the work that we do. And, you know, UN is basically at its best set up to do exactly this, to coordinate initiatives globally.
When I've moved around across Africa, the one thing that I see that most healthcare systems lack, or the hospitals lack, is access to data. Sometimes you as a patient, you go in, they write on a piece of paper. They give you that piece of paper. Once you lose it, that's it. There is no record that you even showed up at that hospital. How can you leverage AI or other tools to make that system efficient?
So you've actually highlighted one of the major issues, right? We generate a lot of health data, but we are not storing them. In AI, we have optical character recognition, sometimes called OCR. So you can just use any imaging technology. You can either, let's say, scan the document, or even just take photo of the document, if you will, and then use an AI system to read the handwritings and convert them to digital formats, digitizing this data, and then creating a very huge AI system that can then make sense of. We are talking about several tens of millions and hundreds of millions of records at this point. The insight that is hidden in there is probably beyond, you know, our expectation at this point.
That was Darlington Akogo, founder and CEO of Mino Health AI Labs in Ghana. That's today's Tech Report. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, thank you, Paul, and that's our show. Thanks for watching.